Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome along to this webinar on our digital future. We might have a few stragglers coming in the next few minutes, but for those of you that are here, a very warm welcome. My name is Dave Newick. I am the Managing Director of Arken.legal. Arken.legal is a leader in the document automation space for estate planning. So we've been around for 25 years and we have a full product suite in and around will drafting, document automation and business efficiency. So today we are going to talk about our digital future. We're going to touch on a range of different things, the technologies, the trends. We're going to talk about blockchain and AI, and some of you who might have been in some of the other webinars earlier on may hear some of the stuff you might have heard before, but throughout all of this we're going to be talking about the people element, the human touch, the stuff that may well determine the way that we work as people, as humans, and the way in which we work in with our customers as well. Now, on the right hand side, you've got a little panel here, and this little area down the right hand side, right down the bottom there, is where you can ask questions. So feel free to do that. We're going to talk for about 60 minutes. I'll take questions at the end. So look, if you've got any, please do feel free. I'll try and make this as interactive as possible as a poll that we're going to be running as well. So firstly, let's get into what we're going to cover off. So it's digitization. We need to kind of work out what we're talking about there. So I'm going to give you a bit of an interpretation, a quote around digitization so that we understand what we're talking about. And then we're going to get straight into the technologies that we think are going to shape our digital future over the next 5 to 10 years. That's blockchain and artificial intelligence. We're going to look at how we can harness some of these things and some of the impacts, the effects that we think that those technologies will bring to the sector. We're going to start to look at a quick business case in and around technology. We're also going to obviously talk about people, and we're going to talk about millennials and the different generations, some of the trends that are happening there, and the nexus between all of those things and some of the technology changes that we've seen. So it's going to be about an hour by the time I kind of get through the wrap up. So stick with us, and I hope that you enjoy it. So a quick poll. We're kind of interested, really want to get you guys engaged in this webinar from the get-go in what you see or where you are in terms of the risks and benefits of technology. So there's a quick poll coming up for you. If you can quickly select that, I'll give you a few seconds to make your decision there. Just while you're doing that, did you know that I'm a Kiwi, by the way, not Australian, just in case you're wondering. While you're working that through, did you know that the Kiwi accent was voted the sexiest in the world? Yes, recent survey. I'm sure the survey wasn't actually conducted in New Zealand, although it wouldn't surprise me if it was. Large margin for error, of course, in that South Africans came in at number 2. So, yes, not quite sure how that came about. The good news, though, is that Australians came in less than 10th. So, to be ahead of the Scots and the Italians and the French was a little bit of a surprise. Anyway, so let's have a look at the poll results. Pippa, what have you got for me there? Okay. So what we're talking about there is most of you are saying, it's about 79%, that it's a 50-50 proposition. You're a little unsure of the benefits, but you're obviously here listening today, so that's great, and welcome along once again. And some of you, about 21%, are saying that the benefits outweigh the risks. I'm wondering whether some of you are wondering how to do this, and you're here to learn a little bit more about that as well. So kind of interesting that at either end of the scale that none of you are really concerned about the risks and you think that the benefits are minimal, and none of you are really completely sold on the idea either. So what it doesn't say is also important. So thank you for doing that. Let's quickly whip through a digitization classification or interpretation. So digitization is the integration of digital technologies into your business processes and IT infrastructure. So we go out and talk to clients all the time, and they're very good to share with us their business processes and how technology, digitization, can really help enable and make those business processes a lot more efficient, particularly when you look at the ability to not have to key in or rekey any data at all. So we're going to talk around that. Now, kind of an interesting thing, we did a survey recently and we said, hey, listen, on a scale of 1 to 5, how much of an influence do you think digitization is going to have in the industry, and in particular the private client sector, I should add, over the next 5 years? Kind of an interesting result, because the overwhelming majority of people said that they thought it was going to have a major influence. So that's a substantial buy-in, I think, to the importance of digitization in terms of where we're going as an industry. Let's have a look at some of the technologies that are going to drive change. And for those of you that perhaps have been on a webinar before, you might have seen this quote, but this is from the UK Office for Science. Yes, I know the UK government is writing an article, in fact, a whole white paper on blockchain, or it's also called distributed ledger technology. If you want a copy of it, just get in touch. We can send it to you. It's a great read, particularly if you like technology. Here's the thing, second line. In distributed ledger technology, we may be witnessing one of those potential explosions of creative potential that catalyze exceptional levels of innovation. What they're saying there is that this is a step change. This is one of those events in the world in and around technology, like the invention of planes, cars, TV, more modern things, smartphones, McDonald's, all of those sorts of things. So catalyze exceptional levels of innovation. It's an enabler. It's something that could potentially make a profound difference and impact to what we do and who we are. So a couple of interesting kind of things there to pick up on as well a little bit further on. What it's saying there is that the technology could prove to have the capacity to deliver a new kind of trust to a wide range of services. What's interesting about that is that they're not talking about a new level of trust. They're talking about a new kind of trust. So bookmark that. We are going to refer to it as we go through the rest of the webinar. Now, a little bit further on towards the end of the opening remarks in this paper, they talk about a couple of things that I think I just want to pull out and reference for the legal sector. Just see which ones you think might resonate. For the government to reduce fraud, corruption, error, no, and the cost of paper-intensive processes. Paper-intensive processes, people. Quite familiar, I'm sure, for most of us in the legal sector. It has the potential to redefine the relationship between government and the citizen in terms of data sharing, transparency, and trust. Key word there, trust. Up it comes again. Really important, isn't it? Because as professionals in the legal sector, trust is a critical element of our relationship with our clients. They come to us because they trust the advice. They come to us because they know that it's confidential. They come to us because they know and they trust that we are experts in our fields. It has similar possibilities for the private sector. Now, in Estonia, who are one of the D5, which is one of the 5 digital governments around the world, of which New Zealand is another, they are already using blockchain technology. Now, why is it even relevant? It's relevant because we're in a situation where the government there had let's just say a fractured or fractious relationship with its citizens due to historical political structures. So blockchain has enabled a whole new level of e-government services to be built because the platform there is now really secure, and it's brought about an entirely new level of trust for that government to have with its citizens. So these things that happen now, they are alive and happening. Now, blockchain, what is it? Okay, for once in technology, it is actually, as it sounds, blockchain is a chain of blocks. So have a think about this. What you've basically got in a traditional IT infrastructure is a database and, and a server, and it'll all be kind of in one place, and everything will be kept in one place. Not necessarily, but you know what I'm saying. Figuratively, the data is a database, right? Within blockchain, what you've got is actually not the data held in one place. You've got a series of individual blocks which all hold data. So depending on the way that you set up the blockchain, it can either work where one block in the chain has the data and nobody else can change it, but they all get visibility of it. Or say in a supply chain situation, you might have everybody who can go in and amend the data. The important thing is, though, is that everyone must have the same data. So coming back to the traditional IT infrastructure, the trouble with that is that you get cyber criminals, you get corruption, you get issues that manifest itself in things like the opioid epidemic in the States. So how does that happen? It happens because the supply chain is corrupted and opioids get released onto the open market there. Whereas in a blockchain situation, that is very, very difficult for a cyber criminal to do because they can't access 10, 15, 20 different blocks of information simultaneously and change it. And of course, they all have to accept the change in any case. That is the fundamental power of blockchain and why it is such a secure platform. Now, let's have a look at some of the applications for this. So top right-hand corner, digital currency. So what you can see there is we're talking about e-commerce, global payments, remittance, person-to-person lending. Obviously, a lot of that's happening these days, microfinance. Kind of an ironic thing here. Blockchain is actually based on the digital currency Bitcoin. So Bitcoin, this is the ironic bit, is the preferred currency of choice for the dark web. And yet here we are, we're saying that we can use it for a more secure platform because it's very difficult to hack. Slight irony there. Anyway, we move on. Record keeping. Now, this is where the kind of e-government stuff comes in. So this is bottom right-hand corner here. Healthcare, title records, ownership, voting, intellectual property, all potential users for blockchain. I can tell you, I went to a meeting 6 to 8 months ago. There were blockchain solutions being put in place here. And this is certainly where something like the opioid epidemic, the supply chain stuff was coming into play in the pharmaceutical industry. Securities, you get these really big, complex finance agreements, and you get private markets, you get debt, you get crowdfunding stuff. That can all be run through with a blockchain platform as well. But top left-hand corner, smart contracts. This is the stuff that's relevant to our industry in particular, because what we're talking about here is, and look, let's go back to the left-hand side graphic. Let's have a think about this. You've got all these individual little blocks here. Hopefully you can see my mouse. They all hold data. Just imagine that now. Now on top of this bit that says blockchain, imagine this as a smart contract, which is based on a blockchain platform. So a smart contract could be a will. So a will could in fact be made by the testator, and they are the only person who can change the data, but in fact the beneficiaries could have a copy of that. The executor could have a copy of that will, and any time that a change is made, somebody's written out of the will, for example, or things are updated, then everybody holds the same information. So that's some of the potential in and around blockchain and the way that smart contracts might actually work. Let's have a look at that on a more in-depth basis. So here's the thing. Blockchain effectively provides a much more secure platform. So what that does within a wills and probate example is that it provides a really secure identity for the testator and witnesses. Straight away, if you use that as an example, you're reducing the level of challenge, legal challenge, to the validity, legality of a will. In fact, I think that under a blockchain platform, you are in fact substantially lessening the likelihood of any legal challenge because the information is in fact all shared. It's all given, there's transparent, everybody has it. So it's very difficult for them to then argue a little later on, perhaps, that that they weren't informed, or that it's not accurate, or hey, I'm the only one with this copy of the will. Well, no, you're not. So this is one of the applications potentially of the blockchain platform. Now, here's something that I think might happen. You remember in blockchain, we were talking about the e-government piece, and we're talking about sort of title and things like that. What if you could use blockchain to sort of pull that information out, and then that would to come through into a living and breathing will, which is a smart contract based on blockchain? What's the advantage of that? Well, at the moment, you know, the way in which we go about as an industry creating new wills is typically by having a CRM system, or maybe a really good diary system, and you tend to kind of get in touch with people every 2 years and say, hey, what's changed? What if you could have the ability here to go to those people on a workflow basis that have actually had change, have got married, have bought a house, have had children, because these things are all a matter of public record. As a next step, what if the will didn't need to be updated by us as professionals, but in fact it updated itself, and we were able to sell a service around delivering that sort of product? Far-fetched, maybe, but these things I think are all potentially doable underneath the blockchain platform. Now, another interesting thing, data under blockchain can flow very seamlessly all the way through to probate. What is the impact of that? Well, you know, probate can take some time, can't it? So there's an impact there. Certainly at a local level, people are able to kind of divvy up the estate and get access to funds, particularly millennials who obviously desperately need it to buy the Ferrari and the Porsche. So you know, there's a really shortening down for the individual of the length of time that probate could take, simply because all the information is there and it flows seamlessly. What is the collective consolidated power of that to a nation's economy? Perhaps explaining why the Office for Science is so interested in it. What if we were to release all that equity into the economy, because that £5.5 trillion that's going to be passed from the baby boomer generation down to the millennials is in fact released a lot quicker? So just have a think about that. I think there's probably some relevance there. Look, these are 3 examples. There's no doubt a load of others, but we've got limited time to go through them. Just before I go on to this chap here who seems to have a problem with his eye right now, let's just pause for a moment and think about the people. So under blockchain, well, what does it all mean? Because you would kind of think that there's some real advantages to the individual, the end client, in having a blockchain. Let's look at it. So they get probate faster. Yep. They get probably a better customer experience. They own their data. It's a lot more secure. So I would have thought all good news for them, really. You know, what about for us? I mean, you could look at that and you go, oh, hang on, Dave. You know, if we do that, then we're not getting the ability to rewrite a will every couple of years. That's a lucrative revenue stream. But as I mentioned before, I think it could also be considered an opportunity. And digitization, I think, is, you know, looking at technologies coming into your business processes, and as a part of that, it's also about looking at the services. What can we provide as services in and around technology? What services should we be providing? I would say to you that they're probably going to be quite different than they have been in the past. And maybe blockchain will, through its greater level of trust, enable us to deliver a different level of service. So, you know, for us, that is going to bring about quite a bit of opportunity, I think. You know, the biggest opportunity for me, if I had to kind of paraphrase it, is that we're offering a greater degree of trusted advice rather than transacting services. So we're going above and beyond the way in which we spend a lot of our time at the moment, which is in the transaction itself and in never having enough time. Let's look at Mr. Putin. Clearly a Terminator fan. Scary thing is, I think you might be right, even though I'm pretty sure he's not talking about commercial contracts. The nation that leads in AI will be the ruler of the world. Yes, I think he's referring to things like election results and perhaps the ability to influence economies, potentially Brexit. There's all sorts of suggestions there out there. So a big believer in AI, but we're not here to talk about military matters. Let's talk about a legal case example. Now, Law Geeks did this study around AI. This just kind of helps shape it up for you. So they compared the performance of 20 United Nations lawyers to an AI bot. Now, they asked them to do a daily risk assessment task, and the best human was 94%, pretty good, pretty smart. Lowest performance was 64%, not as smart, but still pretty strong. And the average across all of those 20 was 85%, which is why they're at the United Nations, I guess. The average of the AI was 94% success, which is pretty good, right? So that is a 9% swing. You think, well, it's only 9%, Dave, what's the big deal? Go to the right-hand page and you see there the average time required for a human was 92 minutes. The average time required by the AI was 26 seconds. Now, without kind of getting a tattoo that says bots do it better, what I'm kind of thinking here, and the point I'm trying to make is that the way that AI works is that it will keep learning. So this perhaps might have had some learning to generate that sort of outcome, but it can generate that in 26 seconds. It will be all the more accurate, all around 100%, I would have thought, by the time it does more learning. Here's the kicker: it can work 24/7, 365 days of the year. Doesn't need the NHS, doesn't need a pension. It will take care of all of those low-level activities. So let's have a look at that. Now, AI, why is it important in the legal sector? So look, it's already been used in some sort of large law firms. You might have read about that in some of the different journals around, and typically it's used for the review of case law. So if you're a fan of kind of that TV program Suits, where ridiculously good-looking people go and congregate in a library and flirt outrageously, I've never seen the program, of course, and consider weighty tomes of case law until they have a eureka moment. What we're saying is that artificial intelligence will in fact do away with the need for the library, and that is so it's being proven. So reviewing case law, I should imagine, is probably pretty boring activity, but here's the thing: from an estate planning industry perspective, maybe there's an opportunity to use it in and around acquisition, because I understand that the industry is going through, and we're seeing it, a period of consolidation. There seems to be a lot of acquisition, particularly in the regional space with law firms, and I am wondering about the ability to look at will banks and to look at other sort of vast amounts of information and to consider their validity, their value. How do you go about reviewing what could be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of documents? AI can do that. That's what it's built for. It's very, very fast. You set it up and it can go through. And I think in that sort of example, that can really make a big difference. You can certainly look at your existing will bank as an example and start to analyze some trends. Maybe it can take some other data from other sources and start to come up with some sort of detail which you didn't know, which can help you run your business a lot better. Now, read somewhere that humans cannot tell actually when they are interacting with a robot. So if you find that hard to believe, don't do it now because I'll lose you. Go to YouTube and Google Assistant. Sorry, don't go to, Google Assistant, that's what I'm trying to say. Go there, have a look at that. What it is a lawyer making a hairdressing appointment, and the hairdresser on the other end does not know that they're talking to a robot because it just sounds entirely human. So what? Okay, what if, and this is a what if we were able to use that sort of technology driven by AI to automate some of the low-level tasks? What if that service was available 24/7? Because I think, you know, all the pieces of the puzzle to deliver that are actually present. They are in the market today. It's just that we haven't seen them in wills and probate as yet. Now, bots, interesting things, right? Bots are lots of different things. They're not kind of, you know, all Doctor Who stuff. So in the most obvious commercial context, you've got chatbots. So these are robots that are software driven. So you jump on a site and you say, hey, I'm interested in changing my, well, so pension, bank account, insurance, whatever. And it'll say, hey, how can I help you? And they'll give you the frequently asked questions and things. So there is a classic example of something that can be used by our sector to minimize the low-level task queries. And we can start looking at some of the advice stuff, and I said that I would in a moment, but fundamentally what we're talking about is focusing on advice that is of high value rather than the low-level stuff, because that's what bots can start to do. Last point, tech company had to throw it in. Just as an FYI, actually the way bots work is that they don't get coded by developers. They do initially, but they actually just self-learn. So that is one of the key outcomes of artificial intelligence, particularly around legal sector, because they can learn more and more and more every time case law changes, every time there's changes to the acts or any other legislation. They can take all of that information and present it to us rather than us having to wade our way through it. So let's have a look at this in the private client sector. So here's the thing, I think that artificial intelligence is going to cause some sort of disruption, but rather than look at that as a threat, maybe what we can do is that we can look at that as an opportunity. So biggest problem we've got is that we are battling apathy. So 50% of the world's population, the global population, doesn't have a will. What could we use artificial intelligence for to establish that 50% of people who don't have a will? Because how do you know? And yet, if you could establish who does have a will, with a national will bank or something like that, then you can establish as against a electoral roll who doesn't have a will. Maybe there's some opportunities there at a countrywide level to solve what is quite a problem and significant opportunity. Efficiency, look, we're talking about automating low-level tasks and processing vast amounts of data quickly, so I won't go on about that much more, but what I will do is I will just point you towards some stuff we're going to talk about in a little while, which is the opportunity to reach new generations through digital services. Now, why is that important? It's important because different generations have a different interpretation of trust, and they want to engage on a different way. So AI will then provide that opportunity for you to engage with different people in different ways. And we're not just talking about the crafting of the services and the way that we go about delivering services in the future. We're also talking about the time that we have to do that, and also who we're targeting. So what's the customer experience? How are we going to go about doing that? And of course, the last thing there is focus, enabling you to focus on the value and human-to-human interaction backed by AI data. Now, look, humans, right? Really important. So I said that I was going to refer to it, and we've got to have a think about what this actually could mean, because it looks like on the face of it, it could replace services. I hope that what you're hearing now is that you think that's probably going to happen, but it'll also create services. What we do know is that it's going to have an impact in one way or another, and I think it's going to be in and around the nexus between the different generations. Now, let's have a look at that whole advice piece. Wills and Probate report said that 83% of individuals want and prefer a face-to-face consultation, and I am certainly not disputing that. That is a cold, hard fact, and a lot of the business and the way that it's been done in the past has been in and around that very mechanism, and we go and have conversations with our clients, and that is the business process. So all I'm saying about that is two things. One, which clients are you servicing, which generates that 83%? Because if you're working with the baby boomers and the Gen Xers and the silent generation, then they are generations that want to work face-to-face. If you're working with the millennials, then some of them would want to work face-to-face for sure at an appropriate point, but their initial research, the way that they're going to consider those services is going to be different, and so therefore it's going to be a slightly different look. And again, think about that from a nexus of technology and some of these trends that we're seeing happening around millennials, which we'll explore a little bit more. So I think the other thing to consider is trust. I'm going to keep on coming back to this because it does disrupt that kind of trust paradigm. You've got to think about how generations will measure and value trust. I think we've also got to look at it and say to ourselves, because as humans we should own this technology piece. It's for us to determine how technology is used and to grab the opportunity to make our lives better, and how can we harness it to deliver those better services that I was referring to, and how can we go about making not just the lives of our clients better, but how can we go about making our own lives better as well. Personally, this is my belief and my hope. I hope that things like AI and technology will make life more stimulating, that we get rid of the low-level activities, that we can automate those, that we can be more free, that perhaps if you look at it, if I just kind of segue out for a moment, the major shareholder that we have, Andrew Barnes, is a real advocate. He's the pioneer behind the 4-day working week. The 4-day working week is now really starting to gather momentum. You've probably heard a lot about this on the news and in the papers and things like that. That's Andrew Barnes, who is our major shareholder. So what if technology was able to bring about for you, for me, for everybody else, an ability to be more free, to have more time to do different things, and certainly from a commercial standpoint to consider how we engage with our clients and the accuracy and the customer experience, the user friendliness that we can exhibit there, rather than the way that we're working now. So let's have a look at this guy, Elon Musk. Okay, he knows something about artificial intelligence. Why? Because he is Mr. Tesla. He's also Mr. Space Labs and Mr. Submarine through the Thailand Tunnel and all that sort of stuff. So South African, okay. So he was saying with artificial intelligence, we are summoning the demon. You all know these stories where there's this guy and he's got the pentagram and the holy water, and he's like, yeah, I can control the demon. Doesn't work out. Okay. That's a scary statement, because if that's what he's saying and he knows artificial intelligence in and out and he's a pioneer in this area, then we really do need to be cautious. Here's the thing. The genie is already out of the bottle, or in Elon Musk's words, the demon is released. When you go to an airport these days, particularly one of the new ones, you're probably jumping on a driverless train. That's artificial intelligence. I ask you, how many of you have a Alexa in your home? How many of you engage with artificial intelligence when you call somebody or you use chatbots? So artificial intelligence is already around us, and we're starting to see it take more and more effect in our everyday lives. So let's move on. Okay, trends that will drive change. This is where we start to sort of talk about some of the generations and the populations, and try to bring this all together in terms of the nexus with the technologies that we've just been talking about. So, okay. These are the key trigger points for making a will. Not all of them, but there's a few of these. So I can just say that I've done about 4 of these, maybe 5, or 5 actually. Yes. Best one ever, midlife crisis. Haven't had one yet. Thoroughly recommend it. Bought a Porsche. Started wearing age-inappropriate clothing. My son was disgusted. And went to Spain and walked on the Camino for a month. It was best month of my life. So have a midlife crisis, best thing. Anyway, point I'm making is that these things will be the stimulants for people going on and making a will. So bookmark that, because in the generations themselves, we're talking about Generation Z. They're the youngest ones. They're still at school at the moment. They've kind of got the headphones on and they grunt at you in the morning, and other than that, you don't really see them. Millennials. Now, here's the interesting thing about millennials, right? Would you believe that the oldest millennial is now 37 years old? 37. So they're starting to get married, they're buying houses, they're having babies, they're taking on debt, they're taking on management roles and positions of more authority. And then you've got Generation X, clearly the best generation of all, and they're going through their midlife crisis, so they're wearing age-inappropriate clothing, but they've got a lot of money to do that. They're buying Porsches, and generally they're supposed to have independent children. I've got a 19-year-old and a 22-year-old, and I would say I'm not quite at that stage yet, and I'm sure a few of you are probably in the same situation. And look, the early ones there have probably got some grandchildren as well. Interesting thing, fun fact again for today, there is a little subgroup or sub kind of generation, which is called the Zennials, which is kind of the early millennials, kind of late Gen X's. So they are kind of like a Gen X in many ways, but kind of like a millennial as well. So if you ever hear the term Zennials, then now you know what I'm talking about. And of course, we've got the baby boomers, and obviously a lot of the wills and probate industry is generated around baby boomers and that particular demographic group, and with good reason, because they are going through probate and more likely to go through probate, and they're a very, very wealthy generation. So I completely understand that. Let's have a look at this quick flick through the populations. Now, a couple of things here. So top three generations, so you've got baby boomers, 14 million, but look at the kind of the age span, 1946 to 1964, there's 14 million of them. Gen Xers are 17 million, 1965 to 1980, so again, a reasonable kind of an age span. Millennials, 12 million, but 1981 to 1985. So really substantial kind of a population there. Now, yes, you wonder what millennials look like. This is them. It's not a Topshop ad. This is Ed, who many of you would have spoken to on the phone. He's wonderful. Then Gronja in the middle, who deals with all of our sales activities, and Jessica, who's our customer success manager on the left-hand side. Now, I'm going to be referring to them, so I thought it was only fair that I kind of showed you their photo. Anyway, so here's the key data relating to millennials. Now, $4 trillion of wealth in the US and the UK is expected to pass from the baby boomer generation to the millennials. Now, I'm going to correct myself there, because in fact I did some more updated research, and there's research all over the place. It's actually £5.5 trillion that is expected to pass from the baby boomers to the millennials. $5.5 trillion. Now, whether it'll be $5.5 trillion is another thought altogether, because obviously the millennials are actually kind of getting inheritance early anyway, with all their support to buy designer clothes and afford the Porsche Cayenne, and go on holidays to Ibiza every second weekend. So that is kind of making a big difference. But the great thing is baby boomers are also spending it, right? So they're going on holidays too, they're having lots of cosmetic surgery, they're buying nice cars. Fantastic. So will there be $5.5 trillion? I don't know, but it's still a huge number. And what is very true is that it's going to end up with the millennial generation. Now, subjective analysis is that the number of millennials who don't have a will is actually quite high. I've done some research. I can't actually find anything that tells me what the stat is. Maybe one of you could do that. But when I ask around any millennial, none of them have a will, and none of their friends have a will. So be interested in what your thoughts are there. So they're buying assets, they're having kids, they're taking on debt, they've no doubt got pensions, and they're starting to think about long term, but they don't have a will. And often their individual arrangements, which you see on a day-to-day basis, are then fraught with risk in and around current legislation. Now, I've touched on this before. Early millennials born 1982, so they're now 37 years old. 92% of them own a smartphone. Don't ask me what happened to the 8%. I think they're all in prison or something, but it seems kind of a bizarre figure that that it's not 100%, but it's 92%. 73% of that 92% will use their phone to shop with instead of a PC or tablet. Why? Because it will take 10 seconds to get the laptop out of the bag. Seriously, because it's all about the instant gratification. So if we consider these things, we've got to think about kind of the nexus of technology and the way that millennials will start to want to buy things. If we think about this from, say, a blockchain perspective, but this is true of all technologies as well, let's just kind of have a think about the fact that millennials have grown up with smartphones, right? That was the big kind of technical change in their generation. So what does that mean? Well, smartphones are good for many, many wonderful things, but they're also instruments of pain and hurt and humiliation and bullying and all those sorts of negative things. And so that the millennial generation, when they look at smartphones, yes, brilliant, they'll use all of that, but they have a different impression, a different interpretation of trust and what they trust and how they trust. And so therefore the way that they buy is entirely different. So for a millennial to measure trust, they may well go on and do the research on their phone. They may well then want instant gratification information. So they'll jump on a chatbot as a preference and say, hey, tell me what is it all going to cost me? Or hey, you know, I need a question answered about myself and my partner because, you know, things are looking a bit shaky, or, you know, whatever the question is. The point I'm making here is that smartphones, the level of trust that millennials have in terms of the way that they go about measuring that trust is going to be different to any other sort of generation. So on that basis, we've got to start thinking about that new kind of trust. So in the industry, how can we start to build services? How can we start to think about this generation who are going to inherit a lot of wealth, who are going to be decision makers? How are we going to go about reaching out to those people? Now, just to kind of reinforce the value of millennials, we go to see clients all the time, and often when we go to law firms in particular, we will meet with the partners or one or two partners, and then there'll be millennials involved in the decision, simply because the partners feel more comfortable in getting a different perspective on technology from the millennials. So the key influencers in those decisions, they're also key influencers at home. Why? An example of that would be, well, who did you ask last time your laptop broke? Last time you couldn't do something on your phone, you asked a millennial, I bet you. So what's happening is now that there's a lot more collaboration. It's just kind of the way that society works. You're finding that millennials are sharing their research, that they're doing the research for the adults, because where do people go to look for information? They go to Google. And who's fastest at searching? It's a millennial. Who knows their way around it backwards? A millennial. So they're a lot more influential at home in terms of decisions, and they will wrap their own framework around that. So we need to think about that when we start to consider the stat of, say, 83% wanting advice. So is that going to change? Are we going to start to see that new services are going to be required? Now, they're going to inherit a lot of wealth, so they're going to be involved in probate. I've mentioned before that the trust is just going to be measured quite differently. And new technologies for them, I think, are really important. We talked about the blockchain example, the new kind of trust. I think that sort of stuff is going to start to really drive in the next 5 to 10 years, which is the digital future piece, some of the profound changes that we expect to see, because you're going to get these two things coinciding. And obviously, we've already said that research and decisions will be made on a smartphone, so we must, as a minimum, have a website that is able to be read on cell phones, but preferably a full range of services. Now, here's an interesting thing. We asked in one of the webinars, it might have been one of the ones that you were in, which generation the participants in that webinar actually targeted. Here's the results. 15.38 said silent generation, 50% said the baby boomers, and 34.62 said the Generation X. Not one of them said millennials, which is kind of interesting, isn't it? Because as we start to explore everything that's going on with them, I know that they're not close to probate, but if we start to look at some of these things that are happening, some of these digital changes, we might want to start as an industry to think about how we can do that and whether we need to start developing services and customer engagement strategies that can do that. Now, just wrap up the millennials piece, because this is all going to come together in the summary before very long. How am I going for time? 15 minutes, so I'm going well. Right, so here's the thing. If I look on TV, if I look on kind of the glossy brochures and things that I see in waiting rooms, all the imagery is lovely silver foxes running around on a beach with their grandkids, right? Which is great for that market. If I asked a millennial whether they feel anybody targets them with imagery, with marketing messaging, with kind of being in a place where their eyeballs are, I could bet my bottom dollar that the answer would be no, because none of us are targeting them at all. And yet, they have assets. The oldest one is 37. So there's all these sorts of things I'm belaboring the point, but we should start thinking about millennials. Now, look, they do have expectations of how to engage. Using bots is really important because they will go to a site, they will engage with an organization that has chatbot as a matter of course. The new kind of trust piece, again, I'm not going to belabor that point, but that is something to consider. Have a think about that when you're thinking about digitization, when you're thinking about using technology. Have a think about the services that you can deliver off that new kind of trust. And here's an idea for you. If there's anything that we can see as a potential disruption to the way in which we go about doing business in the future, I think it's in the provision of online wills. So online wills is an absolute opportunity. Why? Because millennials' needs are pretty straightforward and they want to buy things online, and they probably fill in a will questionnaire on their smartphone. So on that basis, and you've already started to see it happening, where we can see the disruption starting to occur. So a good starting point for you, if we look at this kind of risk and opportunity, if you're looking at it as an opportunity, is to start thinking about online wills and to start to think about maybe using that sort of service as a way to engage with that particular generation, because you can do that quite easily and it's quite sort of a low touch exercise. Okay, right, let's kind of start on the wind up, the summary. Now, here's a business case for you, right? Now, I've kind of thrown some numbers together here to make it nice and simple and easy. If you're doing 100 wills a month and you're doing those wills on, well, for you, if it's you, in Word-based templates, and you're having to reformat, you have to do the renumbering, and you have to drag and drop clauses and do all the editing and things, it's going to take you, we know from our research, around about 4.5 hours. Now, if you're doing 100 wills, they're all complex for the purpose of the exercise, and you're doing 100 wills, then that's 450 hours, right? From the conversations that we have with clients, we ask them consistently, it's a question that we ask every time we go out to see somebody, what is the percentage of time that your drafting team is using to key or re-key information? And it is 50%. Some cases it's lower, some it's actually higher. Let's say it's 50%, that's 225 hours. 225 hours at an average salary of 30K is £3,245 in cost per 100 wills. 225 hours, obviously roughly a month worth of working hours for 1.5 individuals. So, simple case there. If you're looking at a start on digitisation, if you're wondering about the business case for digitisation, to start thinking about the impact as a starting point of rekeying, the cost of keying in data. So let's have a look at that. What would you do with 225 hours? Well, in your practice, in your business, you could spend 225 hours, you could take cost saving, of course, and reduce headcount if that's what you want to do. But you could then use that surplus capacity in your will drafting team to grow your practice. If it's you as a sort of sole operator, then you could use that time, and obviously it's going to all be relative to scale, but you could use that time for business development purposes, going out and seeing customers. You could use it for more trusted advice. You could use it for more engagement instead of more transactional stuff, which is what we were referring to before. You could build more scale into your business. You could work on your business and start to develop more services. Or you could use it for yourself. And for me, that's where a real opportunity exists, is that you could start to spend more time with your family, doing your hobbies, golf or bike riding or whatever it might be. Maybe work on your fitness. Maybe it's time with friends. The key thing is that technology is enabling the change up there potentially for you, because you're not having to do those low-level tasks. So let's do the big wind up. So digitization is just going to intensify in the wills and probate industry. It's kind of really just starting. All the people we're talking to are using technology. A lot of you that are here with us today are using Arken Professional, the will drafting tool. So you're already starting to see the efficiencies in drafting a will a lot faster than what you'd be drafting it doing word-based templates. So good on you. We're going to start to see a lot more business efficiencies coming in, particularly around things like rekeying data. And I'll share with you a little bit of the solution suite that we're bringing to market in and around that. Now, look, a lot of these technologies that are now all around us every day, artificial intelligence, you're going to start to see more blockchain coming through. It's just going to become a lot more commonplace. And when you put that alongside the pace of change in the industry, then there's going to be significant change. And somewhere in there's a tipping point. So the tipping point will bring about, in my opinion, disruption. Why? Because an efficient firm will be able to not just provide new and different services and engage with customers on a different basis, but they'll be able to disrupt price. And if there's going to be some disruption in the market, then it may well be that that's kind of where it happens. So digitalization has a lot of risk, but it also has a lot of opportunities. I really hope that I've tried to kind of give you a good example of what those opportunities are today. And AI and blockchain, please don't discount them, because they have the ability, as the UK Office for Science was saying, to bring about a profound step change in the way that not just the legal sector works, but we work with government, we work in a lot of different areas of our lives. So have a think about digitization, have a think about how you might harness technology. I've given you a couple of ideas on things you could probably get started with. You don't have to go off and build blockchain solutions. I'm not saying do that. Leave that to the experts like us to bring those things to market. But just maybe a good starting point for you is to think about what this could mean to you personally, what this could mean to your firm, to your practice, to your staff, to some of your clients as well. Look for the easy ones first. I can tell you in the conversations that we've had with clients, the biggest business efficiency opportunity available to the industry and the easiest start point, because solutions exist, is around rekeying data. Absolutely. Hopefully that business case has proven that to you. If you can find 225 hours worth every 100 wills, then brilliant. And millennials, if I haven't convinced you by now, then I'm probably not going to, but do take a look at them. They do represent an opportunity. And again, I think when you're considering digitization, you're starting to think about some of the sacred cows in terms of the way that we go about delivering services. Have them in mind. Have them in mind, because maybe that's a great starting point to dip your toe in the water and start to develop relationships with millennials if you're not already. Right, revolutionary technology changes everything. Look, so true. Obviously, this is an old factory floor, and today it's probably all full of robots. What I'd like to say in closing is this: that when we start to look at the pace of change, and I've kind of showed you some of the stuff that we think is going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years, you may be a disbeliever. 50% of you said risk of benefits. Yep, can kind of see it. Maybe not. Oh, look, I get that. What I'd say to you is to consider in your lifetime the changes that you've seen. So think about when you were a lad or a lass and you're at school, and some of the things that were just commonplace around you. Maybe you saw the first PCs, maybe you're on a black and white TV, all these sorts of things, and where you are now. Because the pace of change that you've seen over your lifetime is going to be the pace of change that you see over the next 5 to 10 years. And these things are happening whether we are ready for them or not. So look, there are risks. There are absolutely risks. The biggest risk is potentially doing nothing. So I ask you just to consider things, come and talk to us, have a look at some of the easy wins that are out there, because you can, once you've got time, once you've got some business efficiencies, once you've got some kind of free cash flow, you can start thinking about maybe reinvesting that into more advanced digitization journeys. Now, let's just kind of give you a quick, there we go, right, review of Arken, and then we're going to deal with some questions. Now, I promised to show you the product suite. Now, you'll see top right-hand corner there, Arken Pro. That is the Arken wool drafting tool, which a lot of you know and love. If you don't know and love it yet, and you're still on, some of our legacy software like, Professional Wills or something like that, then please come and talk to us about Arken, because there's a lot of efficiencies there in terms of the speed and the way it works. And best thing about Arken is you can start to build other services around it on an API basis. So if you want and are interested in not rekeying data, then you need to sort of start thinking about moving away from your much beloved legacy software and working on Arken. New tool coming to market, week and a half, Arken Acquire. That is a data acquisition tool. Come and talk to Pippa, Grania, Jess, Ed about the tool. It's fantastic. It will make a profound difference in terms of the ability that you have to collect customer data digitally, and that then flows through into Arken, so that you don't have to collect a form, fill it in, rekey it with all the associated errors and everything else. Now, Arken Digital, that is the online wills facility, but it's actually more than that. So come and talk to us about that, because we've got some big plans changing. If you're thinking about doing some stuff in the online will space, you're just kind of interested to know a little bit more about it, then do come and do that. A lot of feedback we get, oh Dave, online wills, it's kind of breaks the advice model. Doesn't have to. Doesn't have to break the advice model. You can use it as a tool. There's ways in which you can use it and still run your face-to-face approach if that's the way that you want to run things. Arken Anywhere, this is pretty cool. So this is a tool which is going to be released in the next couple of months, which will enable your advisors, if you're a big will writing practice, or if you have a big telephone centre, or if you are going out to hospitals, if you're going into kind of homes where there's a lack of cell phone coverage, or Wi-Fi. It's a bit awkward, isn't it, using the Wi-Fi? Then you can use that tool. So come and talk to us about that. That's really cool. And the API is a thing which basically enables us to talk to and share information seamlessly with CRM systems. So we're in discussions. In fact, we're building our first API now with a major CRM practice management provider. And the second one's all booked up, ready to go as well. And in discussions with the others. So we need you guys to get in touch with your CRM providers and go, hey, we want to integrate with Arken, because that's actually where the bottleneck is they don't believe us. So that would be great. Okay, so that's Pippa. Do we have any questions?
Yes, we do have some questions. First questions, I think it came in reasonably early. I think you might have answered it, but they were basically saying they're quite a small operator at the moment. They only do about 5 or 6 wills a month, and a few other documents. So is it really worth the cost of the digitisation may bring? Is it still worth going ahead? And if so, how?
Yeah, great question. Yes, but you've got to scale that to be appropriate for your size of organisation. So you don't want to go and spend, tens of thousands of pounds. So there's a couple of things that you can do there, though. And look, this goes to your business strategy. It depends on whether you're happy doing 5 to 10 wills a month or whether you want to grow. But if we assume that you wanted to do 5 to 10, then yes, there's absolute value. Why? Because there's actually a whole lot of time that you could use for yourself. So why spend the time that you currently spend doing 5 to 10 wills if you could actually spend a whole lot less time and use that for other stuff, whether that's personal, whether that's for other business things, whether that's growing your business. So just think about the scale. The solutions that exist, I mean, the advantage you have these days is that you don't have to go and buy, a whole expensive server, and you don't have to pay for the licenses and all that sort of stuff. All you got to do is just get in touch with a business like us, cloud-based, pay a subscription fee. You don't have any capital costs, and everything's taken care of. There's no kind of ongoing security, updates, all this stuff. It's all done. So you can get in and get some pretty chunky sort of benefits off a low level of spend. But you just need to think about kind of scale and where you start.
Thanks. There's a couple more questions about blockchain specifically. So in the blockchain will model, who would be able to update the master block, and how could amendments be validated?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Thank you for paying attention all the way through and asking such a great question. Look, there's no blockchain solution in place as far as I'm aware in the world, but the way I imagine that it would work is that the testator would be the only person who would have the control of the will. Now, here's the thing. Perhaps the way that a blockchain solution is set up is that a solicitor could also have control of that data. So it really depends. There is some flexibility to build them the way that you want to build them. But if you contrast that to, say, a supply chain scenario, then clearly what you wouldn't have is you wouldn't have the beneficiaries being able to change the will, but you would have the beneficiaries being able to receive, and this is the power of it, a copy of that same data, because they've all got to hold a copy of the will. Does that hopefully answer your question?
Second, from the same gentleman who just asked that one, is blockchain tech used for document rooms in corporate transactions like HIQ?
Oh, that's a good question. Look, I'm not sure that it is, but I'm sure that it's probably being considered. There's anywhere where you've got a whole lot of documents, and these things can be pretty weighty, can't they? Pretty serious. Then there's an opportunity to kind of not have to print that data out and to digitize it all. Obviously, there's some legislative changes that will need to come about, and there's a whole lot of kind of business process changes that would need to come about to make that happen. But yes, over a period of time, I think that's kind of where we're heading. The other thing I'd say is that, away from blockchain, is that artificial intelligence will have a part to play in and around that sort of space as well, because you can take that information into a digital world, and if you can execute documents on a digital basis on a secure platform, then why do you need a hard copy? Because you just probably wouldn't. Therefore, you bring artificial intelligence into play, and you can start really to speed things up and become more agile. Listen, the question. So if you'd like to have a conversation with me, please feel free to get in touch. I think the next slide. Oh, there you go. That's the product. That's the business process. I can talk to that if you want. But Pippa, you were telling me we've got another webinar, haven't we?
Yeah.
Right. So 29th of May at 2 o'clock. That's not too far away. That's 3 weeks away, is it? This is efficiency in your private client practice. It's a demonstration of Arken Professional. So if you don't, and you're not using Arken Professional, then come along and have a look at that. But there will be some other stuff that we're going to show you as well in terms of the product suite, some of the stuff that I've covered off with you. Briefly, we're kind of going backwards a little bit, but very quickly, this business process map, you've got the client location here. You can see that we've got the hospital there as well. So the way that things could work is that you've got Arken Acquire, which is the data capture tool. That then comes straight into Arken Pro, the will drafting tool. So that's typically sort of customer data, but you know, a lot of you have very chunky fact finds, don't you? And come and talk to us about that, because there's definitely some discussions that we need to have in and around the other data. Perhaps you've got something that goes into Acquire and then into a CRM on an API basis. You know, maybe there's some stuff that we could do for you there. Then you've got the Arken Digital. This is the online wills and the suite of things that that we're looking at there, and that could come again straight into Arken Professional. And here's the thing with the offline or Arken Anywhere. What that basically does is it means you have the questionnaire-only version of Arken, and you can use that offline. When it gets to an online Wi-Fi coverage, then it will upload it through into Arken. There are a couple of things we need to kind of cover off with you in and around that, because it's at this stage only open to large enterprises who can support the tablets and things. We don't have the facility to do that, but that's just kind of a little bit of a business process. And obviously the last piece of that is the API and going into the CRM and case management, and obviously that's your wonderful office there. Look, I think that pretty much closes it. Pippa, yeah. Thank you so much for attending the webinar. In Te Reo Māori, we say ka kite anō, that's goodbye. Thank you very much for tuning in, and do keep an eye on the webinar schedule, because we'll be doing more thought leadership and more product central webinars going out over the next couple of months. Thank you and goodbye.